I now call to order the regular scheduled meeting of the Board of Zoning Appeals. Notice to the public, the time, the date, the place, and the agenda was published as a legal notice on July 1st in the Aiken Standard. Notice to contiguous property owners. They were mailed and signs posted by July 3rd, 2019. Notice was sent by July 19th to the city clerk for posting on the Finance and Administration Building Notice Board and to the Municipal Building Notice Board at least 24 hours before this meeting. Agenda sheets were mailed or emailed to interested parties. As a reminder, it is unlawful for any person giving testimony to this board knowingly providing false information that's according to Section 22-9 of the Aiken Municipal Code. Each infraction is a separate offense with a penalty of up to 30 days in jail and or a fine of $1,092.50. To the board, you have received copies of the July 23rd, 2019 regular meeting. Are there any corrections or additions?
I move that we accept the minutes of the July 23rd, 2019 minutes as noted.
Second.
Brandon, was it John second? It's been properly moved and second that the July 23rd, 2019 minutes be accepted as presented. Do we have any discussion? Hearing none, those in favor of the motion show by raise of the right hand. And we have one that's...
I wasn't present.
Bud was not present. The motion is carried. Old business.
We have the orders from that July 23rd meeting.
Thank you. The orders are being passed around. We'll move directly into new business. Application 19-92006. The applicant was a special exception that has been withdrawn. I call your attention to application 20-93002. It's a request by the applicant for a variance regarding the maximum fence height for residents in a residential district, and that's properties located at 355 Barnard Avenue. To the city, has this been properly posted?
It has.
Any inquiries that you wish to share with the board?
None additional that did not make it in your packet.
Thank you. Presentation.
The property before you this evening is 355 Barnard Avenue Southeast. It's about 400 feet west of Two Notch Road, about a third of a mile east of Whiskey Road. Property is roughly at the intersection of Mimosa Circle and Barnard Avenue. Previously consisted of two lots, which were recently combined for one large through lot, roughly 2 acres in size now, so it's fairly large for the neighborhood. Other properties in the neighborhood generally range from about a third of an acre to an acre. The applicant is requesting a variance to section 4.1.4C of the zoning ordinance, which is our fence height regulation, which states that in residential districts, the area between the plane of the front of the principal building and any street, the fence cannot exceed 4 feet, And then beyond that, to the rear of the house, it cannot exceed 6 feet unless a fence on an adjacent lot along that same property line is higher. In this case, there was a variance. This did not make it in your packet. Staff had some time hunting it down, but we were able to find it in between the time that your packet arrived, and we suspected this was the case, but it was not indexed the way I suspected, so it took me a little longer to find it. But in 2015, the property immediately to the west on Barnard was constructed. At that time. A variance was given by the board for an 8-foot fence, so you will see an 8-foot fence on that property, a privacy fence on the western property facing Barnard. So per our zoning ordinance, the subject property could match that 8-foot fence along that property line. We've not interpreted that to be able to match around the entire property. It's only the same property line that higher fence previously existed. So in other words, for the remainder of the property, you could have a 8-foot fence along the western property line, and then a 6-foot fence per our ordinance on the south and eastern property lines, and then 4 feet in front of the subject principal dwelling. The reasons for the variance issued on the 339 Barnard property, the property to the west, had a lot of the same arguments that will be made in this case, particularly a slightly larger lot size, or a significantly larger lot size than what the district permits, and a larger lot size in comparison to most other properties immediately adjacent to it, as well as safety concerns about a 6-foot fence and having a pool in the rear yard. With that said, staff would be glad to answer any questions you may have. That wraps up the staff report.
Do we have any questions from the board to the city? Brenda?
Yeah, the first variance is the entire fence structure 8 feet around that other property?
I did not verify what was actually constructed, but it has a variance to permit an 8-foot fence around the rear yard, and then the variance says that it has a transition zone where it transitions down to 4 feet.
Mr. Chairman,
Karen?
my question was regarding the image that was included at the end of our packet. Is that the property to the west that you're referring to? What is that image of?
That was submitted by the applicant. I would have them verify. That was in part of the application packets.
So, and just to clarify, I wasn't sure if that photograph corresponded with what you were describing as far as the western portion of the subject property. I believe you said that was 339.
Right. That is seen in your application materials submitted by the applicant. It's up here in front of you on your screen.
Right.
That roughly shows that 8-foot fence.
So they could match that based on the variance up to a point where it stops. Is that correct? And then it has to be a different height beyond that? It can only match?
The way this has been interpreted is that they could match that along their entire western property line.
Not matching just the length of what's existing?
That's right.
Okay, thank you.
I say that entire western property line until it meets the 4-foot standard, which is in front of the primary dwelling. So that's.
John?
Would you clarify something for me, please? On 2 occasions, the staff responds or makes a note that the property is significantly larger. Again, clarify what's the relevance of the size of the lot to the fence?
The size of the lot to the fence in this case only comes into play, I think, if there is it goes back to what the purpose of the fence is. The purpose of the fence is essentially for 2 things: safety and privacy for the most part, and the fence regulation that's in place. The size of the property, I guess, would only come into account in the case of particularly the the aesthetic or the visual in that level of privacy, essentially line of sight, the further you get back from something that you're trying to hide is a shallower depth of field to be able to see it. So if you do have property at a higher grade, say across the street, those sorts of things, it may provide essentially a, you know, if something's right behind a fence, it's harder to see further out where the pool is in this particular case, which would be more central to the lot, as you see in the plot plan that was provided. It may provide kind of I guess a shallower depth of field to be able to see it for the privacy's sake. That would be, I think, the primary purpose of pointing out the size of the property. Grade change would be, I think, more applicable to the safety side and the ability to scale a fence.
You stated that within that neighborhood, within a 200-foot radius, there were 5 swimming pools. What's the height of the fence of those swimming pools?
They varied. I can only affirm that most of them seem to be the 6-foot privacy fence, except for the adjacent property, which has the 8-foot fence. Again, some of them, I don't recall if any of them were just minimum. I believe most of them were at that 6 feet. The minimum for a fence is around a pool per the building code is 4 feet.
Thank you.
Sir.
But
So, Ryan, as I understand it then, based on the drawing submitted showing where the pool is located, I presume that's, the pool is located between the small, what appears to be a guest house, and the 3-car garage. Is that right? Is that the pool shown in between those two?
That's correct.
Okay. And so now the 8-foot fence is what's shown on the heavy line on 3 sides of the property, not going any further than the front plane of the house. Is that correct?
That's staff's understanding, correct.
Okay, so it'd be 8 foot all the way around. In my looking at the property, looking at what the Sampsons have put up, and that's an 8-foot fence. It looks awfully tall, but there's a slight grade difference from where the proposed driveway is and the Sampson fence. So you're going to see the proposed 8-foot fence, and there's a chance that the other 8-foot fence is going to be higher than this 8-foot fence. Is that the way I interpret that?
I think because the adjacent property, with the current 8-foot fence, I think is at a higher grade, it would typically have a higher
Right.
fence height than on this property. We did mention that it looks like, again, not taking into account a topographical survey, that Brandy Lane is slightly above grade of the subject property. The adjacent residence with the 8-foot fence is slightly above grade of this property, and it appears that the adjacent property on the south side facing Brandy may be slightly above grade to this property, but only by a matter of probably a couple feet.
It's hard to distinguish.
It's hard to distinguish. The subject property is generally pretty flat, but there is at least some visual, you can tell there is some grade difference between the area, the adjacent properties.
Without an instrument, it's hard, a little difficult to tell. But the other question I have, if you have, and I saw the Sampson fence, I saw a chain link fence, I saw a board fence, and then I see an old, what appeared to be an old hog wire fence, for the lack of a better term, because it was all grown up. How far is the suggested offset for the 8-foot fence, this new 8-foot fence, so that both fence lines could be maintained? Is there a minimum to that?
We don't have a requirement in the zoning ordinance. It just has to be, it just cannot cross over an adjacent property line. So a lot of it depends on whether, and we weren't able to verify that, whether that other adjacent fence was built actually some distance into the property, or whether it was essentially on the property line.
Okay.
How far off of Brandy is the fence going to be constructed?
If you look at the plan here, and again, I would defer to the applicant, it appears the the image here in front of you references, I believe, about a 12 to 16 foot distance at the drive, or at that current driveway. I believe that's what that is referencing.
Okay.
But again, we could have the applicant clarify probably better than I could.
And what is the landscape plan? Can you address that?
There is no landscape plan required. I don't know if they plan on keeping there is quite a large amount of vegetation on the Brandy side, and along some of the perimeter. I don't know if some of that the plans are for some of that to be maintained, or whether that will be removed in lieu of the fence.
Because the applicant responds, especially after we implement our landscape plan.
Right, and again, that's not something we require to be submitted, so we don't have a landscape plan for the property. They may be able to, probably could be able to better describe what that is, what they plan to do with the landscaping.
Thank you.
So, can I ask a question?
Nancy?
Yeah. So on the Brandy side, that's my concern, is the Brandy side, because that's a front, even though it's the back of the house. And the neighbors next door on both sides would have an 8-foot fence in their front yard on the side, on their sides. And then the Brandy Road would be 8 foot also. So Brandy is not, they don't have to do a 4-foot fence there?
No, so while most of the zoning ordinance references front yards and side yards, with respect to the fence, it references the front of the primary residence. So beyond that, the yard standard does not apply. Essentially, you pick one side of your lot to be the front of your lot. The other sides, we apply the fence, the 6-foot fence allowance to.
But if they hadn't joined those two properties together and another person had a house on that, it would be required to have only 4 feet on the Brandy side.
That's right, with a setback of 20 feet. Yeah, if that were a lot by itself, which, again, the lot line was removed, but had that remained a lot, it would have a 20-foot front yard
The
setback.
purpose of the 20-foot yard setback is to have kind of openness for the neighbors.
A consistent street essentially is and some open space on the front side of properties. That's the purpose of the front yard setback.
But they're legally allowed to have a 6-foot fence on Brandy.
That's correct.
Since we're talking about the Brandy, will the gate be the same height as the fence?
That would be something I would have the applicant clarify.
Brandon?
Couple quick ones. What's the city's opinion on the elevation drop from Brandy to the proposed fence line? I didn't see 2 feet, but what's your
I
opinion
think
on
there's
it?
a slight elevation drop. Again, I don't have,
Did you call 2 feet slight?
I'd call 2 feet slight.
Okay.
Yeah.
I didn't see that, but okay. The height of the fence is measured to what? The top caps, or to the, because, some of this fencing, take the blue one and, it's got caps that stick out, and then you have
Right.
your, what are we measuring?
We've typically measured to the maximum height of a
The
portion of the
tallest
fence.
part of the structure?
Yes.
Okay.
Do we have further questions to the city from the board?
I just want, can you point to
Nancy?
where this is gradually sloping?
Again, this is kind of just going by eyeballing, and it's from some rough topography maps that the county had, but, see here, does this work? All right. So it appeared that the property, this is Barnard, and this is Brandy, so we're kind of flipped upside down from what the map is. Brandy Road appeared to be 1 foot to 2 feet above the average grade of the property, as well as the property here immediately adjacent to the west. And then it appeared that in some portions, this property may actually be above the grade. The property kind of, I guess, to the rear and to the east looked like it may be slightly above grade of this property in some places as well. But again, we're talking probably a matter of just a few feet.
We're talking about the property on the back.
That's right.
Is above grade.
It seemed to be closer to the grade of of Brandy Road, but again,
And
it's
then the property on the front is just equal to the grade.
pretty close to it.
So it's not like the lot is sloping down anywhere. Yeah. The reason I'm asking this, I used to own that property, and I don't remember it having any.
Again, we weren't able to find, I guess, there's not a great increase across the property.
Okay.
It's the property, the subject property itself is fairly flat.
Yeah, okay. I just thought it might be a little bit misleading based on what I remember with taking care of that yard.
Do we have further questions from the board to the city? Before I call an applicant, representative of the applicant, I would further explain the procedures, that anyone that wishes copies of today's proceeding, we ask that you sign up on the sign-up sheet just beyond the double doors, or you may call the planning department. When addressing the board, please state your name and your address. Now, Larlee Construction, do we have a representative?
Hello, I'm Grant Larlee, address 1096 Toolbeck Road. I can answer the questions about the drop. The Barnard is sloping this way to the house, the lot is, and then on the other side on Brandy, there's probably a 2-foot drop, and it slopes, and those lots kind of all bowl to the back property line. And there really is we have issues with water, one of the things we're gonna have to do with this property is put in pits to do the water, because we take on the road water, and there's no storm water on those roads as well. Now, when we first started looking at this property and putting it together, and we saw the 8-foot fence on the property on the west, and then we looked at the rear of the property, and we stood on Brandy Road, and we looked at where a 6-foot fence would be. It basically shrunk it way down where you could just see right in to the property. Our plan is to move that fence back 16, 20 feet, whatever, and then plant grass and some shrubs or trees. And then also we don't want to really even know where the gate is. We just want it to look like the fence and just open into the property at the rear on Brandy Road. When we first started this and we wanted to do the 8-foot fence, we went to all 4 of the adjacent neighbors, explained what we wanted to do, showed them examples of the fence, and all 4 of those signed a letter and approved the 8-foot fence. And that should be in the package.
It is.
Mr. Larlee, when you talk about the drop off Brandon Road, is that the result of demolishing the old house that was there?
No, sir. I mean, when we purchased the old house, I don't know if you ever went there, but it sloped, the driveway sloped right down into the garage, and when we got there, they had sandbags placed in front of the house because it took on the water from the road, and it had so much rot that we thought about turning it into a guest house for this property, but it was beyond repair.
Yeah, but when I look at, and it's not marked as an exhibit, when I looked at what was submitted in the staff package, at the elevations, I get 199.54 for Barnard Avenue, and Bradley Road, I get 199.69. That's only 0.15 of an inch difference.
But it bowls like this, the property.
Thank you.
If you stand on Brandy, and I mean, you immediately walk down the hump of the road.
Thank you.
Okay.
Other questions?
May I
John?
ask another question of Ryan?
Yeah. Yes, please.
What is the purpose for the 6-foot limit in the ordinance? Why not go higher in the ordinance? What is that reason they wrote it to be 6 feet?
I wasn't here when that was written. Typically, 6 foot is, again, this is more from my background in other jurisdictions, it's relative to kind of the average height of a person in that in cases, most people that will block view into a property. Also, it's tall enough to be difficult to scale without being so tall that you start to kind of lose some of the I guess on a smaller lot, you would start to feel more enclosed. You kind of have to recall that most of our zone districts have a minimum lot size at the largest district of 15,000 square feet. Well, on that size of a lot, if you have an 8 or 10 foot fence, it would have a greater feeling of kind of enclosure, less open space, if you will. So I think that's one of the reasons about the 6 foot, I think, is relative to the zone district minimum sizes that we have.
Are there any public safety issues where a higher fence would impede public safety gaining access if they had to? Is that part of any justification for not going higher?
Not that I have heard, and we do have a number of higher fences that do occur in the historic district, particularly, which has kind of an out. It allows taller fence heights in the historic district, and there are commonly taller fences in that district. We've never received any concern from public safety regarding those.
Okay.
Ryan, and in the historic district, we can go to 10 or 12 feet on a fence.
Yeah.
I know we've just did one that was 10,
Yeah.
but I thought,
It can go up to 12 in the historic district.
and that was, yeah, okay.
Thank you. Now, question to Mr. Larlee from the board.
Also to clean up the property lines and make them much more, get rid of all the junk on both sides of or on our side of the fence. And, if possible, the property to the left on Brandy has a fence. So I'm not sure exactly how we're going to tie in, but the one over here has an old hog wire fence. So we would make that probably a common line for them if they want. And so that they could maintain their side, we can maintain our side. And then over here on the Sampson property, which is on Barnard, there is already an 8-foot fence that goes down that property line. And there's a chain link on the property on Brandy on the west side.
Brandon?
Mr. Larlee, what's the approximate distance from Brandy to the pool?
Again, I would say it's probably a couple hundred feet.
At least that, wouldn't you?
Yeah. I mean, the one building's 110, or was 110, we moved it back 50, so I'd say it's probably just over 200.
Okay. The proposed storage building, do you have an approximate size for that?
It is,
I saw them trenching it out today, or they got it.
it's, I don't have the exact square footage, but I can figure it up right now if you want me to.
Not so much square footage, but would you say that square is representative spatially? Was it going to be a little more rectangular?
It has an 18 by 18 in the middle and then comes off with two lower levels that are like 9 by 18.
Is it a 1 or 2 story structure that's going to be built?
It's one,
Okay.
yeah.
I guess in trying to, understand your obviously need for privacy, I mean, you have your pool, a couple hundred feet from the road, and obviously you don't have any privacy issues to either side or the front. I mean, you got the thing completely surrounded by structures and building. You're going to have a building from the Brandy side. There's some vegetation along Brandy. Is that coming down?
That would come down and be replaced with nice manicured lawn, and some new trees would be planted in front.
That
of
was going to be my
fence.
question. Was there any thought given to you know, some trees for privacy along Brandy there instead of a higher fence.
They are, but I mean, trees, as you know, I mean, we can plant big trees, but they cost a lot more than a fence.
Yeah.
I mean, we're gonna plant decent-sized trees, but I mean,
Yeah.
it's gonna take a while for them to grow.
Okay.
And because
The,
it's all one property, we didn't want the fence, we didn't want to separate the two with a fence, you know, across the, you know, the middle of the property.
the property to the west that's got the 8-foot fence, would you agree that that probably stops pretty close to, probably not too much further past the end of your drive there, correct? Their 8-foot fence?
Yeah, I think it goes probably 30, 40 feet past that, I think.
Okay, and at that point, your 8-foot match would end, correct? I mean, you propose it all the way around, but at that point, their 8-foot section is no more, correct?
Correct,
Takes a hard turn to the right and goes across the back of their property, right?
correct.
Okay. So then to the point of either neighbor to the east and west would then have basically 8-foot fencing along their front yard. So as Board Member Dukes pointed out. But you counter that with you've got the approval of both property owners, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Just leaves open the question for the next property owner whether they would sign on to that, but, okay, that's it for me.
You,
Mr. Larlee, how far in did you say from the property line on Brandy that you were going to come to, for the planting?
There's a large tree there that's gonna kind of dictate that, but I think it's around 16 feet.
Okay.
And that can push back a little bit. There is a tree that is there that we wouldn't want to put it on the outside
Okay.
of the fence.
And then how close to that is the storage building? When you come in, about 16
So
feet?
the back of the storage building is 32, 35 feet, I believe, from the tree.
From the tree?
And yes,
Okay. So you'd have another about 16 feet between that and the property, I mean, and the...
yeah.
Okay.
Bud?
Quick question there,
Yes, sir.
Grant. This will be a solid board fence, is that
Correct.
right? Vertically with reinforcing and so forth, but solid, not shadow box or anything like that, solid all the way around. And
Right.
and if I understand, the gate on Brandy will be like a double gate to
Yeah.
allow vehicles in and out
Yeah,
that way?
We really didn't want to draw any attention with columns or anything. We just wanted it to look like it was part of the fence
Yeah.
and just open. I thought I included a kind of an example of the fence from
Yeah,
another
I'm sorry, I
project.
missed it if it was in here. Okay.
One more time.
Well, my only comment
Yeah,
is,
it's in black and white. It's on the last page.
Last page.
okay, all right, I was looking at the pool, but, okay, great. Then, generally, looking at the aerial and looking at the other lots and what staff has said, this is by far the largest lot on this side of Two Notch, on the west side of Two Notch Road.
Yeah,
Is that-
this is the last of the acre. So it was 355 Barnard, and then the one behind it on Brandy was an acre. And then the Sampson's was an acre.
Right.
And then the next one is Anaclario,
Yeah, that-
and it's an acre.
Right.
So there's only a few of these acre lots in there, in this area.
So this by far is by combining, obviously, the two
Right.
roughly acre
And-
lots, it's the
like-
largest
Like I
one in the
said,
area.
Mr. Ogletree said that, you know, the two roads are equal, but
Right.
we have this going on the property.
You're the builder, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Architect, where,
Architect's Cam Scott.
okay, he's not here. I don't see him. My question, I don't know if you'd be, I'm concerned about, on the Brandy side, the 3 properties to the right and the 3 properties, you can go back to the green, yellow one if you want.
Okay.
You know, those not having a line of sight on Brandy Road.
Well, that was the reason for pushing the fence back and not having it right on the road and kind of having grass and some plantings, so you know, we can push it back off of Brandy Road to allow them to have, you know, be able to
But
see.
the fence is only going to be 16 feet back.
I think we can come back further than that. I mean, if the board wants us to go 20, I mean, there's one tree that's kind of dictate kind of where we go.
That's why I wanted to kind of ask about that. If you're standing at the one end of Brandy and looking down,
I think that maybe that tree's in one of the pictures.
That's what I was trying to find here.
And it's not there, it's that, well, no. Let's see. I don't see it in any of the pictures, but I would think that that tree is probably at least 20, 25 feet back.
Grant, if it's 20 to 25 feet back and you pulled your fence line back off of Brandy, would that distance, say, using that tree as your mark, would that allow you enough distance to get a vehicle all the way off the road right away if they had to stop and open the gate or stop and close the gate?
Yes.
Without getting into the roadway?
Yes. I mean, 16 feet would give you that probably. But I mean, we can push it back and get, you know, 20, 25, whatever, you know, would get us back, you know, further off the line if you want.
Well, that would just be a concern, to getting the vehicle, be it a truck with a trailer, or be it a standard
I think with the
automobile, just getting it off the right of way.
Yeah, location of that tree, if we, you know, we're 35 feet, I think, from that tree to the back of this building, this shed, so we'd want to keep it on the Brandy side of that tree, I think.
Yes.
If we come back too close, then you
Right.
kind of lose your ability to get into the back of that shed and back up
Right.
to it.
Judy? Karen?
This may be more of a question for the city, but perhaps it's something that you've investigated. It sounds like the tree could potentially be an issue as far as you'd then have to address the city about removing the tree in order to accommodate, should the fence go to the 20-foot setback?
I think we would be okay at 20 with the tree.
It wouldn't require, like, removing it.
I mean, it's a large tree, but it's not in the greatest of shape. We're trying now to save it, you know, but, yeah, that's all I could, you know, on the tree. I mean, it's a water oak, so it's not a great specimen tree, but it is a large tree, so. And some of the other trees that we took down on the property, ended up being, you know, this big, but they were that hollow in the middle. You know, it was a matter of time before they fell. And some of them, when we dropped them, they just exploded. They were so rotten in the middle. So, when we cleaned up both properties.
Thank you.
Do we have any further questions, John?
Is the vegetation along Brandy, I assume that's yes, that is Brandy. Is that going to remain?
No, there's really nothing there of much value. There's some cherries, you know, you know, there is some crepe myrtles, but we would remove those and plant grass and put the bushes and trees back near the fence.
So are you familiar with the landscaping plan? The applicant mentions twice the landscaping and the landscaping.
Right now, we are coming up with the landscape plan with Susan Kleinbug, and we're kind of working that together. What we want to have is a large lawn back to the shed from the pool. We plan to landscape it. I don't know if you've seen any other properties that I do, but I mean, we plan to do a lot of landscaping to it.
We have further questions from the board to Mr. Larlee. Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have others to speak to the variance request?
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, members of the city, and board members, my name is Stephen Von Geddes. I live at 323 Mimosa Circle. There are 5 houses between this property and mine, and when I read the notice, and right next to Barnard Road, I looked at it and I said, an 8-foot fence here? Well, that's obviously not what they're talking about doing. So my comments were to say, we don't need an 8-foot fence there, in my opinion. It would not look good. It would be the only 8-foot fence in the neighborhood, and I just couldn't see it. So that's why I came down tonight. If their fence is going to be along the sides and somewhat back from Brandy Road, personally, I don't see a problem with that. But in listening to your comments, I think that's not what the situation, or that's sort of what the situation is going to be. And I appreciate your comments. And I think you'll take care of the property owners that are there now and the property owner who is going to be moving there, which will be a good property. They've improved things. Quadrupling or pentip, making the property as large as it is as compared with as small as it was. It looks nice. And I'm glad to have it, so long as there's not an 8-foot fence, excuse me, right in front of the property and right next to the street. So that was my comment, and thank you, gentlemen, ladies.
Any questions from the board to Mr. Van Gogh? Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Others to speak to the variance request?
Hello, I'm Julie Halverson, and my husband Scott and I live at 806 Brandy Road, so we are we're on the eastern side of the property on Brandy Road. And we are supportive of the 8-foot fence. We believe that it will be a nice privacy barrier on that side for us, and perhaps take care of some of the noise that might be coming from the pool area or the pump. And I think with the setback off of the 8-foot fence off of Brandy Road by 16 to 20 feet will certainly help our sight line going down Brandy as we're coming out of our driveway. And also, we have a 4-foot fence, picket type fence that comes off of our 6-foot fence into the front yard, and that will, continue to open up that part of the lot for us as well. So.
Ms. Halverson, what was your address again?
806 Brandy.
806. Thank you.
Can I ask a question?
Judy?
How long is your 4-foot fence?
Oh, I couldn't tell you exactly, but at the point at the front wall of our house, it transitions from 6 down to 4.
Right, so the 6 is at your house, and then it goes down from there?
Yes, the 6-foot fence comes up to our front, the front of our house. Yeah.
What I was trying to imagine is with the 8-foot fence beside you, will the 8-foot and the 6-foot stop at the same place? I was wondering how far back from the property line the 6-foot, I guess, started.
I can't tell you that offhand, sorry.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions from the board to Ms. Halverson? Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have others to speak to the variance request?
Thank you for listening to me. My name is Linda Harris. I live at 938 Whiskey Road, which is down the street and to the right from this property. I pass that property often. As a homeowner that lives on Whiskey Road, I deal with a lot of noise. We have a short four-foot fence that allows the noise change. All around the back of our property, we fenced in the back from the house line to the back to our neighbor's yard for privacy. And also, when we moved into the property, we had lots of people walk right through. You could look out your bedroom window and see someone. So we know the need for privacy. However, we only have 6 foot. If my husband and I decided next week that we do not have a pool, our neighbor does next door, and it's a vacant house with a pool, with fence covering around that. If my husband and I decided next week to ask for a variance for 8 feet for all around our fenced-in area, would y'all consider that? The house that's vacant and they have a pool, the geography is that it's probably truly at least 2 to 3 feet higher than our house, so they could see into our yard with no problem. I'm questioning allowing this only because, as has been suggested, that it bowls, the property bowls in the back. It would seem like if it's high enough on Brandy and it's high enough on Barnard, then that bowling would be an advantage. You know, it would be lower, you wouldn't see it. And the aforementioned shed, if it's going to be the levels, it's going to cover anybody looking back and seeing anybody in the pool. And visually, I was missing on the graphic for the fence line. If the pool area is supposed to be enclosed, no matter how big the fence is, and that it's supposed to be enclosed all the way around. I think there is omitted behind the guest cottage or whatever that is on the west side of the property. There's no fence that goes across to protect any little cutie pies in that pool and somebody, you know, coming in the pool. So there's no fence on the west side of the house that I see. It's all going straight back. And because I do see the enclosure on the right, the driveway side, I do not see anything on the left. Maybe that's just a graphic error, the draftsman omitting that. But I'm concerned. I'm concerned that would do that. And it does change the atmosphere, the community of Whitehall Estates and all of those homes. It's community. And a bigger fence, a taller fence, wider fence. I just would like y'all to really consider it. Perhaps giving a good long-hearted look at this and thinking, I mean, is that adding value to the properties on either sides? And further close from that property to the end of Whiskey, there are a lot of homes that have not been improved. You know, still first owners from past time, and they can't afford to do a bigger fence or whatever to keep the property and concerned. So I appreciate you listening to me, and I wish you would consider this hard and long and pause and look. So, any questions?
Any questions from the board to Mrs. Harris? Thank you. Do we have others to speak to the variance requests?
Hi, my name is Chanda Crisp Thornton, and I live at 782 Boardman Road. I bought my house in '02 and had no idea I would still be there, and now I intend to own this house until I'm not able to live on my own. Probably a year and a half ago or so, and there's Boardman, and then there's Brandy, and then Barnard. I happened to drive, I hadn't been on those two streets in quite some time, and about a year and a half ago or so, I happened to drive down those and was so impressed with what has happened on those two streets since the last time I had been down. It's really been delightful going by and seeing the beautiful remodeling jobs and the few new houses that have gone up. So I have taken great interest in that, and this new one that is going up has just been fascinating to watch. It's just been fun for me. So I was surprised a couple weeks ago when I went by and noticed the sign for the variance for the fence. So the reason I'm here is because in my house, and I certainly have no pool, and a small backyard, but I'm going to need to put in a new fence in my yard in the next year or two, and I want an 8-foot fence in my backyard. I had planted a bunch of trees. A lot of those I'm going to need to take down, and now I'm having to spray for mosquitoes back there because the mosquitoes are so bad everywhere. I would much prefer to lessen, the natural screen that I've got in addition to my 6-foot fence, and be able to have an 8-foot fence in my backyard and cut down on the mosquito problem. So that's why I'm here. I don't want it to be just because this property is so magnificent that they're getting an 8-foot fence, and it is. It looks fabulous. So how can I come back and get an 8-foot fence? That's my question.
Do we have any questions from the board to Ms. Chris Borden?
Okay, well, you may see me again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have others to speak to the variance request?
My name's Charles Harris. I'm the other half of Linda Harris, 938 Whiskey Road. Our property also happens to be a double property, so it's larger than most of the ones around us. It also has a real variance of about 4 feet. It is on Whiskey Road. Whiskey Road, as you all know, is terrible. It's noisy. All the ambulances and fire trucks and police, everything goes by our road at all times of night. So it would be nice to have a tall fence, but we have a 4-foot fence because we came before you, and that's what we got. But in reality, the area back there behind us, and like I said, we're on Whiskey Road, just to the right of Barnard, is all open. There are places that have 4-foot high fences just down the street from there. RS 15, it's got a 4-foot brick fence all the way around. It's got a swimming pool in it. Looks very nice, but it's open and you can see it. There are other places that have 4-foot high fences. And the real point of this is we're going to turn into a compound if we all have 8-foot fences. And I don't think we really want that in Aiken. I don't want it in Aiken. I would love to have an 8-foot fence too, but I don't really want to have a compound. Yes, we had problems with people walking through our yard every day because it was a shortcut. And so we had to build a fence to do that. But I also have gates in it. I don't think it's a good idea to generate a precedent to start having 8-foot fence. I know Sampson's have one. I wasn't here to listen to that one. What was my point? The privacy, if it's down low, and the privacy on there, they could put a privacy fence around the pool. I used to live in Huntsman. We had a privacy fence around the pool that was 6 foot high. Everybody could see everyone else, but no one could see in the pool. I don't understand why they can't do that here. If they're worried about privacy, a 6-foot fence should be fine. A 6-foot fence around the pool should be fine. And that would be a heck of a lot safer. I also don't see location for even a 4-foot fence around the front of the house that would isolate the pool from Barnard. At least not in this drawing. So, I'm done. My recommendation is don't accept it, or don't grant the exception.
Any questions from the board to Mr. Harris? Thank you.
Thank you.
Do we have others to speak to the variance request?
This drawing here is the one that shows the pool and the shed and everything on it. So I think this is actually where the 8-foot line come to here and stop. This is showing the Sampson's fence that comes down that y'all granted. And then over here, this fence would actually come down and square back to the house here. So nothing is going past the plane of the Barnard house. I think and you may correct me, but the Sampson's fence was built and then asked for permission. Is that correct?
I can't verify that. Yeah, that wasn't in the records that I had found. I didn't get into that level of detail.
Okay. But just to clarify, our fence is going to come back and go to the garage. The extension that you see there on the west is actually the Sampson's 8-foot and not one that we were going to put in. And then ours would come back over and on the left side that's the master bedroom on that side of the property. Thank you.
I was going to allow you some rebuttal time, but yes. Please come. And would you mind reading yourself into the minutes again?
Okay. Chanda Crisp Thornton, 782 Boardman Road.
Thank you.
I just wanted to mention, when I had gone by this estate and saw the posted signs for the variance, I just took a picture of it. I had not been to a city council meeting, and I do have a picture of it, and I don't know if this was true of all the signs, but it gave the address tonight of 114 Park. If I hadn't had a friend that I know used to work for the city to call, I wouldn't have had a clue where the city council meeting was. I don't know if that was just one sign that was wrong, but she said, no, it's 214 Park, not 114.
Thank you. Thank you. Duly noted. Do we have others to speak to the variance requests? Final call. Others to speak to the variance requests? Seeing, hearing none, the chair would entertain a motion so we can enter a period of discussion.
Mr. Chairman,
Bud?
so that we can enter a period of discussion, I will make the motion for the approval of a variance to section 4.1.4.c of the zoning ordinance to permit an 8-foot fence on single-family property at 355 Barnard Avenue, Southeast, tax parcel number 121-17-11-003. Further, I move that the setback of the fence along Brandy Road be at least 25 feet from the Brandy Road right-of-way, and would depend upon the location of the existing water oak so that that fence can be constructed properly along that setback. Further, that the final order run with the land and shall be recorded at the Aiken County RMC office.
I second.
Been properly moved and second that we approve the variance request with the addition of 25 feet from the property line. Roadway, I'm sorry.
Right of way.
Roadway,
Or right of way.
right away. It's been properly moved and second. Do we have any discussion?
In order to vote in favor of this, I
Well, I'd have to have all 6 criteria being met, and they aren't all met. And particularly, this is their own actions. It's something that they want. It's not something that's necessary. We've heard from a couple of people, they are not in favor of it because of what it'll do to the, you know, the openness of the neighborhood, which is not one of the criteria, but anyway, I just don't see where this meets the criteria to be approved.
Well, to
Brandon?
Board Member Dukes' points, I am struggling with the number 3 and number 6 in terms of the application of the ordinance. This particular piece of property would effectively prohibit or unreasonably restrict the utilization of the property if we limited them to a smaller fence. I don't think that would be the result of turning the it's certainly a nice want to have. In terms of 6, the authorization of variance will not be of substantial detriment to adjacent property, and the character of the district, to Board Member Dukes' point and to some of our speakers today, the character of the district will not be harmed if we grant a variance. And to the gentleman's comment on compounds, that's maybe a slight exaggeration, but I think that does go to the point that you start getting, and I do appreciate a lot of the fantastic building and larger character properties that are being developed along there, but you know, looking at the one on Barnard and Whiskey that's for sale, that's quite a large, magnificent home. It's got a 6-foot fence around it. The one on Boardman and across from Dunbarton Oaks on that corner there, that's a 6-foot fence around a very large, magnificent home and stately lot. And not wanting to unreasonably restrict the utilization of the property, I am concerned with the privacy aspects of the pool, but the way the pool's been positioned between the 2-story, 3-car garage and the adjacent building to the other side, and being well over 200 feet from the road with a shed already obstructing view from Brandy, and I just don't think you need a massive privacy wall there. I think the pool's very well situated for privacy as it is. I did not see, I wish I was a little more certain of this, but I also did not, especially if we're talking about pulling the line back 25 feet, well, that would certainly be of help. My concern on the detriment of the neighborhood still is you're still going to have an 8-foot fence along people's front yard lines, or side yard lines anyway, on those people that are facing Brandy. That's the unusual part to this, is you got, you know, the ordinances get turned around because you got a forward-facing zoning requirements that are impacting a rear-facing Brandy, or what would be a forward-facing property if there were a property there. So I am sympathetic that he would be able to match. You know, there's been a previous variance granted for certainly I believe that's the Sampson house is the western property, right? If I'm saying that right, I would certainly would feel strongly that he'd be able to match for the length that goes, but then that's not much past his garage area as it is. And then to see a taper down to the zoning requirement as you go further back and around, or even to keep it symmetrical, whereas 2 building structures are 8 feet, you know, past the pool and to the equivalent of the Sampson rear line, and then have it taped down together just to give you some symmetry. I would certainly be in favor of that as well too. But those were my thoughts.
He pointed out more things than what I had originally. I have a pool in my backyard. We have a 4-foot fence, and you can see right through it. It's wrought iron. And So I don't feel like this is at all necessary. an 8-foot fence. But that's nothing to do with what we're passing.
Do we have any other comments? Karen?
Mr. Chairman, it seems that there's strong arguments for both sides, aesthetically, structurally, and functionality. The aesthetic on Brandy seems to be the sticking point, the compound feel, possibly the use of the materials and the proximity to the road. I'm a little torn because I think it seems that the property owner wants to maximize the fact that they have 2 lots. That's a very generous parcel to come in off the road to 25 feet, which is actually 5 feet more than, and correct me if I'm wrong, Ryan, the 20-foot setback. If this were the front of a property, because of this tree, there's the possibility of them sort of being penalized. They can't use that additional, I don't see the measurements from a square footage standpoint, but they would be able to use less of their property. With that sort of board and batten style fence that is very, it really stops the energy of the property. You can't see through it. Aiken, historically, you look at a lot of the aesthetics of the older properties that are in the historic overlay, that aren't in the historic overlay. There was a lot of attention given to these beautiful brick walls and architectural elements. And I know that there's some landscaping that's being considered to beautify that backside. And I know that this is unique because it is technically the backside of a property, but it's still what people have to look at going by. I'm not sure where this speaks to the motion, but I'm wondering if there's a way that the aesthetic could be addressed in such a way that the property owner could achieve the privacy, could achieve the security of the higher fence. But if the aesthetic was addressed, perhaps if it wasn't that sort of wooden compoundy looking fence, if there was something to be presented that was, you know, beautiful and lent to the Aiken aesthetic, I'm wondering if that's something that we could suggest or put forward that's a requirement of the higher height that might perhaps make everybody happy.
Can I respond to that? It's not making everybody happy, it's whether we follow the rules that we're supposed to follow for a variance.
That's understood. But
And a 6-foot fence would, number 3 is a biggie, and I didn't even mention that, and I thank board member Brent for telling us that. I overlooked that one.
Well,
But you have to, in order for a variance, you have to meet all the criteria.
Understood. One of the things that is referred to, however, is the slight change in the topography where in the applicants in number 1 refer to even a 6-foot fence would only facilitate 4 feet of privacy visually.
But it wouldn't restrict them from using the property. That's my point.
True.
Also, in that if the property sinks in the middle, then the high fence on the, then 6 foot, that's going to be even higher on the ends, what he's saying.
But I believe Grant had spoken to the fact that that was going to be remedied because there was a drainage issue insofar as there were pits or French drains or something to be implemented in order to facilitate water drainage. Because I can't imagine, I know just from my experience with putting in even just a fence on a property that was slightly crowned, there was water pooled, in the corners. That has to be considered as well, I would imagine. I don't want to speculate, but I'm thinking that would have to be brought up to grade. That pooling couldn't stay in place.
Well, with the fence line being brought back, I'm assuming that you're bringing it back to much more of a level spot. So there again, the 6 foot from a scalability standpoint, you should be getting much more of the 6-foot effect, because there's not going to be anybody from Brandy pole vaulting over it from 2 feet advantage. So someone seeking to scale the fence, I think if somebody wants to scale your fence, it doesn't make any difference whether it's 6 or 8 feet. I mean, that's really the bottom line. So when you go to the privacy aspect of it, I think they have sheer distance, another building in view, or in between the pool and the thing, and with some trees. I'm just not seeing a real compromise on, hard to be a peeping Tom from 250 feet away probably, but, where there's a will, there's a way, I guess. But I just don't see any, again, I'm absolutely in agreement aesthetically, this would be beautiful. I mean, it's hard to argue. They're doing an outstanding job with everything that I saw there. It's going to be a beautiful home. A beautiful 8-foot fence around it would look really nice. But again, we can't open there's got to be a compelling hardship to them for not getting that 8-foot fence, and I'm just not seeing it. Again, I'm willing to let them match up to the areas where there's been a variance granted, and even to keep it symmetrical on the other side, and then begin your taper down to zoning code. But we've already had 3 or 4 people speak to the point that we'll be busy granting fence variance hearings here over the next month or 2. So again, I'm all for hardship, and if there really is a true hardship and not just a nice to have, that's kind of where I'm drawing the line, I guess.
Question, and I'll throw this back to Ryan. If the proposal was to a 6-foot fence versus 8. Now granted, we've got 2 lots here, and as has been pointed out, we've kind of turned the ordinance kind of on end here a little bit, because we've got 2 lots that were originally, we've got 1 lot that was originally 2 lots, and technically one home was facing Brandy and the other home was facing Barnard, excuse me. So in that sense, yeah, the variance, the ordinance would apply fairly straightforward. 4-foot, 6-foot, is that correct?
If they were 2 separate properties?
If they were 2
correct.
separate properties.
Yes.
So with that understanding, we've got 1 lot now that was originally 2. It's been combined, it's 1. So if they put a 4-foot fence from the plane of the house out to Barnard and a 6-foot fence around the rest of it, that wouldn't require a variance.
That's correct.
Okay. They could do it without just, as long as they comply, 6 foot.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, if you think about it this way, this is a little bit different because we don't have very many through lots.
Right.
Which you see this a lot more often, the applicability of where the front is and the 4-foot section and the 6-foot section is on corner lots. Often you'll see a side yard on a corner lot that'll have the 6-foot fence. That's a little more common than having a through lot where you have to deal with a separate street frontage on the backside. But you're correct, that the 6-foot does not require to meet the setback on the rear side, the way the ordinance is written.
But also, they are able to, without a variance, they're able to meet that 8-foot height on that western leg too, correct?
That is correct.
Yeah, so I'm all for symmetry here. I mean, I give it to them in the same amount on the other side, just for a symmetry standpoint and step down to the back. I mean, you got 2 large structures on both those sidelines anyway, so there's no, to me, there's not going to be any, no great leap of variance. That guest home to the left of the pool, or guest house, is that what that is, or is that just a pool house to the east of the pool? Is that going to be a 2-story structure? Just one, but with a pitched roof? I mean, okay. So I mean, it's an 8-foot fence along that. Yeah, okay, you can see it there. So an 8-foot fence coming back on that side is not, to me, there's no aesthetic difference there. And that would give them some symmetry to come to the level of the Sampson rear lot line to begin their step down to code. It gives them the natural variance they get by having the Sampson leg, and gives them some symmetry, and immediately around the house and the pool, this 8-foot structure that they so choose and so want.
Did you get an answer to your question, or do I need to call Mr. Larlee back to read himself into the minutes to give you an answer to your question?
I got it. Granted, it was from the
Okay, thank
Bob
you.
Euchre seats, but I did get it.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any further discussion?
Does there need to be, in trying to understand what's being said here, do we need to modify, or just, are you suggesting modifying the motion, or leaving it as is?
I would be up for a
Brandon.
modification that would at least allow him to match what he's already granted, the 8-foot match to the eastern side as well, before he would begin his step down the code. So that would be a small variance given to him. And it would at least, he would able to, if you will, compound it symmetrically past his building, all his structures, his garage, his pool house, to where he's given a variance on the one side, the 8-foot, to that Sampson back property line. Then he could scale it down to code from there. So he gets at least a little something.
So, as I understand it, you're saying that you want to modify the motion to include the 8-foot back to the end of the first properties before they combine them. So it'll match the properties. The property on the east would match the property on the west.
Correct.
Which is a sample, which is already
At 8 feet.
8 foot by variance, a previous
Correct.
variance. I'm going to ask the clerk to reread the motion, and then the motion maker can modify the motion with the person seconding the motion if he so desire.
Board Member Kyle moved, Board Member Turner seconded the motion to approve application 20-93002. Approval for a variance to section 4.1.4C of the zoning ordinance to permit an 8-foot fence along the single-family property located at Avenue Southeast, tax parcel 121-17-11-003, with the setback of the fence to be at least 25 feet from the Brandy Road right-of-way, or at the furthest point from the Live Oak, not Live Oak, Water Oak. With the final order to run with the land and to be recorded at the Aiken County RMC office.
Now, does the motion maker wish to modify their motion to include the discussion item?
Yes, yes, Mr. Chairman, I do, would like to approve a amendment to the motion as discussed or as indicated by Brandon, to modify the fence, and help me with this, you want to modify the fence 8 feet on either side.
Yeah, he'd be allowed on the eastern side to match his already granted variance to match the western
West side.
8-foot, for the length of that 8-foot span, and then be required to scale down to, step down to the,
6 feet.
to match code.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, I will agree with that.
Now, does the person seconding the motion?
I agree.
Thank you.
Question
No.
about it, and it still means that the Brandy side will be 25 feet from the road?
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
as governed by the Water Oak.
Even if the Water Oak's gone.
Yeah. But 25 feet is as stated in the motion. Yeah.
Yes.
Are we all clear in our mind for the motion? Those in favor of the motion, the modified motion, raise your right hand. Those opposed, same sign. The motion is carried unanimously. Since that is the only item on the agenda, the chair would entertain a motion for adjournment.
I so move.
Second.
The motion is adjourned, the meeting is adjourned. You make the, yes, now, we're off the record.